Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
And also by my 20-hour Yoga for Pelvic Health teacher training that is happening at Just Breathe Studio in Bermuda, March 6th to the 8th, 2020. So if you're like me and the weather's still a little bit chilly for you and you want to go to a sunny, warm, and beautiful location to learn about yoga for pelvic health, that's again March 6th, 7th, and 8th of 2020. Spaces in this training are limited. Go to theconnectedyogateacher.com and look under trainings and events to find out more or how to register. As I'm recording this episode now, this coming weekend, I am diving in and doing the 20-hour Yoga for Pelvic Health teacher training in Meaford, Ontario, and I am so excited. And always with the training happening, we set the dates for the next year. So the dates have now been set for Meaford, Ontario for September 19th and 20th. This training is open to any yoga teachers, movement educators, or physiotherapists who want to learn how they can incorporate yoga into their work with their group classes, their one-on-one sessions, in with their client work, and really uniting yoga and pelvic health. Someone just reached out this week to ask me if there's a practical component to this teacher training, and there most definitely is. I really believe in giving information, giving the theory, and then practicing and trying it out in our own body and with different bodies in the room. It is really one of my favorite things to teach, and I would love to see you there in person, either in Bermuda or in Meaford. Either one will be great. So welcome to episode 143 of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mom of 3. I'm also a yoga teacher and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. This podcast was created for you so that you can connect to the information and ideas every single week and feel supported, especially on the tough days as a yoga teacher and also a small business owner, because you're both things. In your journey of starting your yoga business, you may have asked yourself, should I start a nonprofit or for-profit? There are certain differences between running a yoga nonprofit and a yoga business for-profit, and certain things to consider that can help you to decide which would be a better fit for your aims and goals. This is why I asked Jessica Kinsey to come and talk to us on the podcast. Many of you have reached out and told me, maybe I should be starting a nonprofit. Should I be starting a nonprofit? What is involved with having a nonprofit? Jessica is the expert in this area. She joins me in today's episode to unpack the key differences that you really need to consider when you structure your yoga organization, as well as how to get more donations, make the biggest positive impact in your community, whether you have a for-profit or nonprofit business. This episode is really a great listen for anyone who is interested for sure in starting a nonprofit, but I like that we get into talking about how we can give back to the community even when we're a for-profit yoga business. If there is a link or a note in here that you want to go back to, don't worry, all of the show notes are ready for you at theconnectedyogateacher.com/143. I want to give a shout out to one of our listeners from Canada. Jenny says, I'm a new teacher and this podcast has been so helpful for me. I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for leaving your testimonial, Jenny. It really means a lot. It's short and sweet and gets to the point. I'm so glad that the podcast is helping you. Connected Yoga Teacher listeners, those of you who have not left us a review yet, either on iTunes or on our Facebook page, I love to read them here on the podcast and give a shout out of thanks to you. So if you haven't done that yet, make sure you go and do it and then have a listen. I try and include each and every one. Before we meet Jessica, let's hear our hot tip of the week from the team over at Schedulicity.
Hey there, Connected Yoga Teachers. This is Mickey with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Human beings are not machines. We can only endure so much before we need a break. Yoga teachers treat both the physical and mental well-being of their clients, and that can sometimes take its own mental and emotional toll. When you need a break, Schedulicity makes it easy to create a block of personal time. Carve out a little bit of time for yourself and rest assured that it will be protected in your schedule. Online clients will not know that you're taking a break. They'll only see the times that you are available, so you can practice self-care and avoid burnout.
Thanks so much, Schedulicity. Now let's dive in and meet Jessica Kinsey. Jessica is the founder, CEO, and Social Impact Strategist at Prodigy and Company, a company that is dedicated to helping impact-driven organizations create business strategies that will help them to achieve their mission. Jessica describes herself as a serial entrepreneur. She has founded multiple companies. She holds a degree in finance and also has an MBA from the University of Tulsa. In her current business, she has partnered with nonprofits and for-profits to really dig in and help them develop their services, expand their reach, scale their impact, and build sustainable revenue streams. Jessica is a firm believer that when you do good, you deserve to do well. And that's why I was so excited to get her on the podcast today. Also, a shout out to Amanda McKinney, who connected Jessica and I. Amanda's a mutual friend of both of ours, and they live in the same town. And when I was saying I really am getting a lot of questions about nonprofits versus for-profits, Amanda connected me with Jessica. So thanks so much for that, Amanda. Let's dive in, connected yoga teachers. I can't wait for you to hear this. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Jessica. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here and share what I know with your listeners.
So I feel like I kind of know you already through Amanda McKinney, because if anyone knows Amanda, you know that you two are biz besties. And that's how I really got connected with you and was excited to do this episode, because one of the most common things that I hear from yoga teachers is, I want to start a nonprofit because I don't want to market and I don't want to have to ask people for money. I really want to give back to the community. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I want to get Jessica onto the episode to talk about this. So before we dive into that, let's look at what is the work that you do and who do you do it for anyone who doesn't already know you?
Sure. Yes. Amanda is my biz bestie and we do lots together. So it's been, as I was kind of saying before we came on, I feel very tangential to the yoga community, just being involved in having conversations with her and what she does. So Prodigy and Company is the name of my business. I am a social impact strategist, which is a fancy way of saying I work with folks, mostly in the nonprofit space, but some social entrepreneurs who are trying to do good in the world. And they're trying to figure out, a lot of the work I do really is around how they make money doing that. And a lot of it looks like kind of the business side of revenue generation, selling something. So I don't focus quite as much on fundraising. There are people with professional certifications that get into that world, fundraising and grant writing and that kind of thing. But I really take the perspective of, how can you treat parts of what you do like a business and actually earn revenue on them so you can be sustainable and scalable? Because I believe that people who are doing good in the world deserve to do well, and that more money means that you get to do more good. So it's this really great virtuous cycle that I want to, help people get locked into that so they can, create the positive change that they've set out to do.
So do you always then work with nonprofits?
No, not all of my clients are nonprofit. In fact, I sort of have a passion for helping folks with for-profit businesses figure out how to build social good into what they're doing, because, and that's not to say that every business is successful, right? Lots of businesses fail, unfortunately, but there's a natural kind of sustainability built into trying to create a for-profit business. The goal is to earn enough money to keep going and to pay yourself and to pay your team. And it's not that that's not the case on the nonprofit side, but there's very much a different mentality about how that works and what that looks like and the level of control that you have between a nonprofit and a for-profit. So I actually really love working with for-profits who want to try to build social good and social mission into the work that they're doing, because it's just such a fun and interesting challenge in a different way.
Right. Okay. So for example, like if a company, I'm thinking of our Mama Nurture prenatal yoga school, someone came up to me and told me about this amazing program that helps to send like a token, a little gift of thinking of you to people who have recently lost a baby. And they were saying to me, that would be an amazing thing for Mama Nurture to be a part of. So basically be like that business would have some way of giving back to their community. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways that for-profit businesses can do that, and we can get into those specifics if you'd like. Sometimes it's just I'm giving back of my profits. Sometimes it's built into the actual work in terms of who you're hiring, where you're sourcing your products. There's a number of different ways that a for-profit business can be tapped into doing social good just through the natural course of their business.
Right. I'm thinking of our local donut store, which you have some in the US, but not too many, Tim Hortons. And every once in a while, they'll have like, it's time to buy the smile cookies. And so much of this money will go towards this giving
Right.
back.
Yeah, that's kind of I don't want to say that the easiest necessarily, but that's just a matter of giving profits, right? And so you can have a certain product or you can have a certain day, that a percentage of the proceeds or, like Newman's Own. I don't know if you're familiar with that. They make dressings.
Salad dressing. Yeah.
Yeah, that company was started entirely on the basis of all of their profits are donated to different organizations. That was the whole reason Paul Newman started the company. It was a way for him to create something that would earn money that then could then be donated back to different causes. So that's certainly a way to do it. And I'm sure, and I've honestly not really looked specifically into the operational details of Newman's Own, but given that that's their mission, I would imagine they also source things sustainably and do some other, things within the operations, the day-to-day operations of the business that put additional types of social good into the world. Another, other things that you can think of would be like businesses that hire folks coming out of the criminal justice system. So they are, whatever it is that they're doing, typically making a product in a lot of cases. The it's a for-profit business that's set up to sell something, but they're employing a certain demographic of people, trying to give them a certain skill set that they might not otherwise get. So that's a social business because they are, the focus of what they're doing is really about transition and rehabilitation, but they're selling a product at the end of the day. So that's another example of how you might be able to do something like that.
These are great examples. And I know that our yoga teachers are always trying to see like, how can I help my local community? How can I help in a grander scale in the world? So this is super helpful. What if a yoga teacher asked you, how can I start a nonprofit? And what if they came to you and said, I want to start a nonprofit because I don't want to be taking people's money. I want to give back to the community. I don't want to ask for money and I don't want to market.
I don't want to ask for money is always really amusing because you still have to have donations. So that's, there's a number of differences, but a big one between a nonprofit and a for-profit obviously is that you're getting donations, whether or funding of some sort, whether that's grants or individuals or foundations. So you're still having to ask, and it's a fairly different. And I think, and I've never been a development professional, so this is kind of my outside opinion, but it's a different and harder ask, I think, to go in and say, you think it would be easier, right? To say, will you give me some money so I can run this amazing yoga program that's going to benefit people? And if you have someone who really cares about the cause and they can really like envision the change that's going to come from that, it might be an easy sell. But more often than not, you're asking someone to give money for something that just makes them feel good and that they aren't really getting kind of tangible value out of it, which I think is a harder sell than pay $15 and come to my yoga class where you get the actual benefit of being in the yoga class.
Right.
So you're still selling something or asking for money. It's just in a different kind of way. So that always sort of makes me laugh a little bit that people think they won't have to, quote unquote, sell themselves if they have a nonprofit, because you definitely still do. And then the marketing side of things is, and we should have Amanda here for this as well, right? Like you still have to get the word out about what you're doing, whether or not your class is free or paid. If you don't market yourself and tell people about the value of the class and where it is and how to sign up, you're still not going to have anybody there. So it doesn't matter whether or not you've gotten money to run this class that's going to be super beneficial. If you don't fill it, then you're not doing the good that you set out to do. And obviously you can get into lots with like partnerships with, different, organizations or demographics of folks that you want to help and all of that, but you are still marketing and selling yourself to those people to get into their, whether that's like a boys and girls club or a mental health facility or, some other group that you want to serve with your yoga. you're still having to sell yourself to those people. And we think it should be so easy because we're offering to do this thing for free and it's going to provide so much value. But not everybody really processes and understands that. Because you're likely going to be talking to other people who are nonprofits if you're going that partnership route. They're thinking about the 5 million things that they have to do today, and you coming in and offering a free class. Sure, that would be great, but what is it that I'm going to have to do to make this happen? So it's not that they don't necessarily see the value, but what they see is all the other things that they have to do to make it happen too. So in many ways, you're definitely still marketing yourself. You're still trying to sell yourself, just kind of with a little bit of a different focus. So I don't think it's really any easier to have a nonprofit than to have a for-profit.
Oh, that's so interesting in terms of marketing and really asking for that money, that it's still the same thing. So what are the benefits then of having a nonprofit?
Yeah, so the two things that I talk to people about when it comes to, are you deciding between a for-profit and a nonprofit, are finances and control. So finances has to do with, can you earn enough revenue to sustainably cover all of your operating costs and also pay yourself and any team members or contractors or whoever you might have working for you? Because you might be able to cover your operating costs, but if you yourself aren't getting paid, that's not sustainable either, because you can't work for free unless you're independently wealthy already, in which case, great. So you have to be a for-profit, you have to earn enough money to cover all of your operations. If based on your model and the way you have things set up and what you want to do, you can't fully cover your operating costs, then there's definitely some benefit in being a nonprofit and getting donations to cover the rest. Obviously, that goes back to the selling and the marketing and getting people to make the donations, but that's a big part of it, because not every thing that is putting social good out into the world is 100% sustainable on its own. I mean, I don't make the assumption that anything that someone wants to do could, be sustainable in that way. And then the second part of it is control. So if you're a for-profit business, let's say you're the sole owner, you have 100% control of everything that you do or don't do. We can get into if you were to take on an investor, what that means. So you can certainly give up some control in some ways. But a nonprofit entity is required by law, and it's different by state and I'm sure in Canada as well, to have a board of directors. And your board of directors is basically your boss, and they can, if they don't like the direction you're going, ultimately they can get rid of you. It's not that happens all the time. More often than not, if there's that kind of issue, the organization just gets shut down. But the point being, it is required by law, and there are bylaws about what they can do and what level of control they have and what level of control you have. And then all of your finances are public. So again, I know obviously about US law, you have to file your tax forms are made public and some of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of transparency, which in some ways is good, right? But you just have to understand that when you're getting into that's what you're getting yourself into, and that you are going to have to publish your tax returns, and it's going to say what your salary is, and it's going to say what you're spending money on and who your donors are and some of those kinds of things. So there's other things, obviously, but to me, those are the two big ones when someone is making a decision. Can they make enough money to fully cover all of the cost, and how much control do they want / are willing to give up?
Right. Oh, those are some great points. That's a good one right there, in that all of your numbers would be published and your salary would be. So basically, if you were the founder of a nonprofit, you would get paid by that nonprofit. You would decide on what your salary is. And like you said, your board of directors. Do you know in your state how many board of directors you need?
Oh, I think it's 3 in Oklahoma. So I'm based in Oklahoma. I think it's 3 here. I don't know how, what is that a common number across the US or not? But I think it's 3 or 5, kind of, that's pretty standard. It's an odd number because of voting and all of that kind of stuff.
Right. But that's something to think of. These 3 people could then be making the decisions for your business. And yeah.
Yeah, not to get too far off into board management practices, but what often happens when you're starting out is you ask your friends and family. So if I was going to start a nonprofit, I'd be like, hey, Amanda, will you sit on my board? And, I'd ask, my cousin or whatever, which is great starting out. But oftentimes what you find, and I've had lots of conversations about really early stage nonprofits, is they've asked friends and family who don't have any experience being on a board of a nonprofit. They don't oftentimes know really they don't have experience in what you're doing. Like the type of work that you're doing. So they don't understand why you might make certain decisions one way or the other. And oftentimes they're fairly disengaged. They've said yes because they're your friend or family member and they want to help you out. And you have to have your 3 board members to be able to do this. But they're just not as passionate about the cause as you are. So it makes it really, really difficult to work with a board that is disengaged and not super familiar and experienced with what you're doing and not super familiar and experienced with just how a board should run in the first place. So aside from the money thing, which, is hit or miss depending on people's kind of connections and how they raise funds and that type of thing, board management in the early stages is always something that people struggle with. And there's usually after a year or two kind of a wiping the slate clean and saying, okay, now I need to actually get people who have some experience with this, either on a board or in my specific focus area. And that's just it's just a lot to deal with. It's a lot of people and relationships to manage and a lot of things going on kind of outside the core focus of your work that has to be handled to keep the organization running.
Right. More and more when you tell me about this, you're painting a picture where I think I definitely would not want to ever start a nonprofit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this may be kind of a question you ask, but just, for a quick kind of soundbite, I guess. And there's lots of decision points. I've obviously given kind of 2 big ones, but it really depends in many ways on what you want to do and how you really feel about it and what you want to take on and manage. And there are some things I think where society generally is just still in a place that some things as a for-profit people kind of can't quite handle yet. So there's kind of some perceptual stuff out there as well that definitely has to be thought about, even if you could be totally sustainable operationally and you really just want to take it and run with it. And I now that I've said that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but there's just some things that people are there's this kind of weird feeling about making money off of helping others.
Right. Like one that I can think of is like organ donation.
Right. Yeah, that's a great example. Everybody would lose their mind if you were like, I'm going to start a for-profit organ donation company.
Right.
Even though okay, there's a couple of things you could donate. And anyway, we won't go down that path. But yeah, that's a perfect example that there's still some things that people can't wrap their head around. And I could get on a whole soapbox about the concept of you should do well and make money if you're trying to do good and create positive change in the world. If you want me to go on a rant about that. But some of that stuff still exists and we have to be aware of it and understand kind of, again, what we're getting ourselves into across the board.
Right. So if a yoga teacher came to you and said, I really want to start a nonprofit, what would be some of the questions that you would ask them to make sure that they understood all the ins and outs, or that what would be the questions then that you would have for them next?
Yeah, I mean, so immediately I would say why, which is really broad, right? So some specific questions would be, who is it that you want to serve and how do you want to serve them? And then, depending on kind of those answers, it would really be digging into, I would start with a money question because the control question, because if you can't hit the money, if you can't be fully sustainable, in some ways it kind of doesn't matter how much control you want to keep or let go of. You will need to be a nonprofit and think about donations. So I would kind of start on that. Who do you want to serve and how do you want to serve them? And why is it that you think they wouldn't pay for that? Because that's really, in many ways, also, I think what it comes down to is we think, and in some cases, this is 100% true, right? The people that we're serving can't afford to pay, right? So there's the other piece of that is, and this is both in the nonprofit space and in the for-profit space, the person that you're directly serving doesn't always have to be the person that's paying. So a really simple example of that would be if you were going into, say, a boys and girls club and you wanted to provide yoga for the youth in that program because of all the amazing benefits of yoga. And you think, well, those youth can't pay. Well, no, but could the program pay? Could their parents pay? Could you get a sponsor? And obviously getting into advertising gets into a lot of other kind of potentially gray areas, but it's always something to consider, right? Would the local water park sponsor the yoga classes for the youth to get their name in front of them? You could be a for-profit in that case, right? So there's kind of lots of questions and angles to take when it comes to why don't you think the specific thing that you want to do, someone would pay for? such that you would need to go out to someone maybe completely outside of this world and ask them for, a grant or a donation to run your program. And with my business background and my focus on kind of revenue generation, that's sort of always the tact that I take, because that's how my brain works. I just sort of naturally think about, like, could you monetize that? Could you make money on that? Which isn't necessarily always the best thing. So, but that's kind of where I go. I mean, with my clients it is, but that's kind of where I go. So talking through some of those things, and then oftentimes it comes back to things that you mentioned earlier, which is, well, I don't want to sell myself. I don't want to, promote it as it, and I don't want to seem like I am greedy or trying to make money. Again, there's kind of we have those individual perceptions, but there's also some societal perceptions around that as well. So sometimes it's very simple, like, let me put together a real quick financial, spreadsheet for you and show you that it's possible for you to make money on this. And then sometimes it's kind of a deeper mindset conversation around, no, it's okay. You deserve to make money doing this work, helping other people. You have to take care of yourself first. That's a thing that I think yoga teachers understand, right? You have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of someone else. So it can get into those more kind of mindset conversations as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. I was just thinking of an example that came up in my own life yesterday. I was working with someone who had a brain injury well over a year ago. She was in a car accident, hit by a drunk driver. Her life changed in an instant. She was a nurse for 35 years and had to be let go of her job because she could no longer do it. And she's been coming to our physio office because we have a great specialist who specializes in neuro. And she's been coming to yoga with me. And now she's to the point where the insurance company is like, okay, funds are running out. You can no longer get the massage and the yoga that's been helping you. And she was telling me, like, the tension headaches are coming back. And so my brain automatically went to, how could I help this woman? And not only her, how can I help the other people in my community who I know are dealing with brain injuries, who I know the yoga helps them, but they can't, a lot of the times they can't afford, like, they've lost their job or they can't work or
Right.
they can't leave their home. So what would you then say for that situation? I know it's very specific, but it might help our listeners.
Yeah. I think, and this is, again, might be one of those cases where you, like, let's just assume you were going to go off and start an organization to do this, right? And you're trying to make this decision, for profit or nonprofit. It might be one of the things where, it would need to be a nonprofit and you would need to get donations, but I would certainly start with some of those same kind of questions of, okay, who do you think the target population is for this? And that's kind of backing up a little bit. That's the other thing that is, maybe that is too specific and that is not enough. Yes, that's great. And you want to help those people, but there's not enough of that population to do really anything kind of on its own. And so you find a way to bring them into other things. So that would be part of the conversation I would have as well, is like, so you have a specific reason you want to help folks that have had traumatic brain injuries. And it sounds a little bit crass sometimes to say these kinds of things, but, like, how many of those people are there? Like, are there enough of them for you to focus all of your time and energy on that? And if the answer is yes, okay, great. Like, let's continue down this path. If the answer is no, let's look at that being one segment of something larger that you do. And so maybe you start this yoga organization and you're offering classes and you let people with traumatic brain injuries come to your classes for free, but other people pay. So the size of the market matters in both the nonprofit and the for-profit world as well. But that aside, I think that, okay, how many are there? How many of them do you think really couldn't pay or in a situation where they wouldn't have the money? I would go back to that. Are there other people that could pay? And I'm not familiar with this world, so I can't necessarily think of anything off the top of my head, but are there neurosurgeons who would pay, or, people who work in the neuro space who would pay to sponsor a class because then they could put a pamphlet out? It's a marketing expense for them or something along those lines. Are there other, kind of businesses and corporations who would look at what you're doing, not as a charitable donation, but as a marketing expense? So again, you have to think about how you want to handle advertising to the people that you're serving and that kind of thing. And everybody has different lines of where they feel comfortable with that. But I think we often think, oh, well, if someone's going to sponsor a class, that's going to be a charitable donation. Their marketing budgets are way bigger than their charitable donation budgets for most companies. And if you can present a case to them that says, this is the value of getting in front of this population or this demographic or this type of person, and I'm going to use, again, I don't really live in this world, but let's say there's a specific kind of tool that you would use that would be helpful, like a ball that you sit on or something like that, right? So you don't really know what I'm talking about. Like, I'm going to use your product in the class and show them how it would work when they do these things, sponsor the class and give me the balls for free or whatever. That's a marketing expense for that company. You don't need to be a nonprofit to do that if you can get a company who wants to market to the folks that you're serving. And it can be done in a way that isn't pushy or aggressive or uncomfortable. You can just say, hey, I use this amazing product all the time, and I think it would be really beneficial to you. And oh, by the way, they just happen to sponsor this class so that you could come and get the services that you need for free. So that's kind of a specific example of how you might take, that situation that you talked about and do something in kind of a for-profit capacity, serving folks with traumatic brain injuries.
Right. Two things that I hear you saying over and over again is, well, obviously the money has to come from somewhere.
Right.
And whoever that someone is that's paying for it, they're often thinking, what's in it for me or what's in it for my company?
Absolutely. And certainly if you have, and this is true of anybody, right? Whether it's a yoga teacher or someone else, if you just have a heart and you want to volunteer and you want to teach one free class a week and open it up to the community, or go into a Boys and Girls Club, or go to a facility that works with traumatic brain injuries and teach a class once a week for free, that's a way you want to give back. Go for it. I don't ever want to stop somebody from volunteering. If you want to just go mentor at the Boys and Girls Club, or, whatever it is, like, we need people to volunteer. I have conversations with nonprofits about how they get volunteers, right? So if you just want to do a couple of hours a week, this is that's separate. Go do that. Absolutely. If you're looking at how you basically earn a living and make your livelihood doing this, and you want to combine both your expertise and skill as a yoga teacher with your heart to help X population, and you want to do that full time, money has got to come from somewhere, whether it's the people in the class who are paying you, or someone who is sponsoring it, or someone who considers it a marketing expense, or a local family foundation who wants to, donate to the program to make it happen. You have to get paid if this is what you're doing full time. Like, that's the big thing. And I think people have such big hearts. It was exactly what you said. You're working with this lady and you see that she's in a situation where she might not be able to continue to get services that she needs. And you automatically go, oh my gosh, how do I help her? That's why I love doing this work, because it's people who have those kinds of reactions and those kinds of hearts that are my clients, because they get into this and they're trying to figure out, how do I help people, but also earn a living and take care of myself? And that's where I want to be able to step in and help them figure that out. Anyway, kind of a side note, but yeah, the money's got to come from somewhere, and no one will give you money for any reason if they don't see the value for themselves. And even if that value is just, it's going to make me feel good to donate to you so that you can run this program, that is still value and benefit that person is getting. That's another place I think in the nonprofit world, I don't really understand that there's still and it may be, 100% equal isn't the right word, but there is still an exchange of value between the donor and the organization. The organization is asking for money to run a program or do their work. And so the money that they get is the value to the organization, but the donor wants to give for some reason, whether that's, I want to tip the scales in my favor for later, whether that's, I really care about this thing and I want to, have my name on this good work that's happening. There's lots of reasons why a donor would want to give, but it's still an exchange of value. So whether you're, getting someone to pay $15 to come to your yoga class and you're having to explain the value of why they're going to, what they're going to get out of it, or you are asking for a $10,000 donation to run a yoga program with a Boys and Girls Club or with folks who've had traumatic brain injuries, they want to know what's in it for them. What are they getting out of it? And that's just kind of the way it works, right? So whether you're for profit or nonprofit. So I think that understanding, and then understanding what that value is to the other person, and then you build that into your messaging and your marketing and the way you talk about what you do your website, all the other things that go along with it.
Oh, this is so much to think on. Thank you for all of that. Is there anything else that you can think of that good questions for yoga teachers to sit down and ask themselves, or yoga studios, because I know some yoga studios want to run like this as well? What would be some of the questions so first of all, going back, I think that you said, how much control are you willing to give up?
Right.
How transparent are you willing to be with your money? How willing are you to dig in and get the money that you will need to run this thing? Are there some other questions?
I mean, like aside from in terms of kind of generally thinking about should you be leaning or make a decision to go for profit or nonprofit, there's obviously lots of kind of operational, logistical, how is this actually going to work kinds of things that you get into, but you have those either way. So to the point of I'm trying to make this first kind of high level decision, I'm about to go, file with my Secretary of State. Do I, which box do I check kind of thing? I think those really are the big ones. And then on the nonprofit side, I think, so even if let's say you do your financial analysis and you think, oh, this is not going to be sustainable, so I need to be a nonprofit. That's the first step. The second step is, do you think there's going to be people who are going to fund your program? So looking at whether that might be grants, whether that might be family foundations. Do you think you've got a big enough network to raise money from individuals? Stepping back and thinking about that fundraising plan just a little bit. Because again, you can have a really great program that does amazing things, but if you can't convince someone of the value of bringing that program to your community, they're not going to give you the donations for it. And so I think that depends on what kind of, Tulsa is a very philanthropic community, and we have like the highest number of family foundations per capita or something crazy like that. So my mind tends to go that direction in terms of kind of family foundations, but you've got major donors, people who have money that are willing to donate and that kind of thing. So it's just, scan the landscape of your community and really think about whether or not there's folks who would see the value in the kind of program that you want to run and would give you the money to do it. I think this is true in any case, right? But how familiar is everyone in your community that has the money to donate with yoga? Do they really understand the value? How much convincing are you going to have to do? If you've got a family foundation who's, I don't know, made their money in a yoga business or something like that, that would be an easy thing, right? But so I think that's something to kind of look at too. If you're leaning more towards nonprofit because you've answered those other questions and that's kind of the direction you're going, make sure you take a look around and see that there's some folks that are likely to get on board with what you're doing.
Right. Oh, these are such good points. And I like how you brought up at the beginning as well that we could still be in a for-profit business and build into the giving back to the community. If we're like, okay, all of this is not what I thought it was going to be. I thought a nonprofit would mean like I would get some tax breaks and I wouldn't have to ask for so much money, and just like sort of money would fall from the sky and it would be easy then to give yoga back to the community and I would get paid. So if they're leaning then, okay, I have my for-profit yoga business, what are some of the things that you would suggest that they look at in terms of adding in a way to give back to the community? You said, they can volunteer, they can teach free yoga classes. Do you have some other ideas for our yoga teachers?
So that's obviously the easiest one that comes to mind, because I think in most kind of cases that I've heard in the yoga world, that's really what it's about. It's how do I bring yoga to a population maybe that couldn't otherwise afford it or that really needs it. So obviously just volunteering your time to teach a class for free, or maybe building a partnership with, I keep using kind of the Boys and Girls Club example or something like that. That's obviously an easy place to start. Just maybe there's kind of, when we were talking about the traumatic brain injury, maybe there's a certain population that you let come to your classes for free. Obviously you'd have to, if you're an individual teacher, you have to work that out with the studio, and there's some things there. Maybe you offer private lessons on a sliding scale based on income. So if you've got someone who, and there's kind of ways to do that. A lot of folks just sort of let people pick, so they don't you don't have to bring me a pay stub or something like that. But there's a number of organizations in all kinds of different services that do sliding scale based programs, because they can potentially serve people from the lowest income in a community to the highest income in the community based on what they do. So they say if you're in the low bracket, it's free. If you're in the high bracket, it's maybe more than it would be. So instead of $15 someone at a higher income bracket would pay $20. So then someone in a lower income bracket could come for free. Or someone that helps you offset the cost of serving folks with traumatic brain injuries or whatever population it is that you want to serve. So there's some things you can kind of build in there.
There's a couple of examples that I've heard. Well, one of our studios, what we did was people were asking for or telling us that they couldn't afford yoga classes, but we didn't want them to sort of stand out in any way. Like we didn't want them to come in and not be paying for a class or not have a class pass. So what we did is we had a round robin class. It was 2 hours long. All different teachers from the community donated their time to teach it. All of the money from those classes went towards buying people a pass. So they still had a pass like everyone else. They could apply on our website. The teachers were then still getting paid when they taught those regular classes. So it was an amazing system in that people got, free yoga when they needed it and they applied for it and no one knew who got it, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really important in lots of areas, and thinking about the kind of the way we treat folks who we think need help, and maybe they do really need help, but giving them that same level of kind of dignity and respect that we would give to anybody else. So I think something like that is a really great way to do it. You've taken donations or charged a little bit more for a class so that you could give someone a pass so they don't feel different when they come in. It's kind of correlates to the folks who want to donate old, dirty, ratty clothing to the homeless because they think, well, they're homeless. They need clothes. They should take clothes. And it's like, that gives them no dignity and respect. Go to Walmart and buy them a brand new $5 t-shirt or whatever. Anyway, so it's that same kind of concept that I think is definitely worth thinking about in that sort of social good kind of giving back space. Is, are we doing it in a way that doesn't really ostracize or make these folks feel different, more different than they already do, right? I mean, they already know they've had to apply and they've had to go through these things. So how do you make it as seamless as possible for them to participate in whatever, it is kind of programming that you're offering?
Right. That's a great point. Another example is I know a yoga teacher near me who every once in a while come to class and your payment for the class will be food bank items. And then she will take a picture of this mountain of stuff that everyone has brought in, and she'll take that and donate that to the food bank.
Yeah, I think that's a great example in thinking about, pay with food or pay with clothing, or, if there's something has happened kind of in your area and people need items, offering up a class where people can pay with donations is a great way to both kind of give kind of free yoga in a way, but also give to another cause as well. So thinking about how you can kind of, depending on obviously your passions and your interest, other than just offering yoga classes, how can you kind of utilize your skills and expertise and tie it into other causes and other needs in the community where people can get both at the same time?
And so then one thing I just want to kind of wrap this up with is, I know working with yoga teachers is sometimes yoga teachers will fill so much of their time with the giving back and the volunteering their time, or to okay, I'll help this person out. And what I see is then slowly it's like they put themselves out of a job. Like they're not making enough to sustain. So I'm sure you see the same thing. Do you have anything that you would tell those yoga teachers?
Oh, that's really tough because it's hard to, tell somebody not to do the thing that your heart wants to do, which is help people. But it kind of comes back to, you've got to take care of yourself first, and you have to be able to pay your bills and make a living. Otherwise you can't do this work at all. Right. So if you get to the point where you're not making any money on your yoga and you have to go get a job somewhere else, then you're severely limiting the amount of time that you can teach yoga and share your yoga with the world. Which I think people sort of know that, but sometimes just having that conversation is a little bit like, oh, okay. And the other thing, I think the more kind of tactical piece of that would be doing a kind of a cash flow or financial spreadsheet to say, this is how much money I need to bring in to pay my bills or for the lifestyle I want, whatever that looks like for, however somebody wants to kind of think about it. This is the minimum I need every week or every month. If I do private lessons at X amount, if I teach classes in studios at X amount, if I, whatever that looks like, how can I bring that in? Okay, how much then you get to think about, okay, how much time do I have left? So let's say 30 hours a week will get me the income that I need, and I'm willing to put 5 extra hours a week to volunteering. Or, I'll do a free private lesson for somebody, that kind of thing. So just putting numbers to it helps you make decisions in a different way. Because if you say, I need 3 private sessions and 3 classes at a studio and, maybe one other thing, then I can do whatever I want with the rest of my time. And if that's go out and get more private clients or teach more public classes and make more money, great, go do that. If you want to donate the rest of your time and volunteer and help and give, great, do that. But know what those parameters are to those, to the financials that you need and what that looks like in terms of your schedule. And also just thinking about your schedule. This is the thing I think a lot of service-based business owners get themselves into, is they think, oh yeah, it'll be pretty easy for me to make X amount of money if I charge this, $100 per hour and I do this. But if you calculate it out, well, if that's 40 hours a week that you have to work to get there, what about your business development? What about your sales? What about your administration on the back end? And then you're working 80 hours a week and you burn yourself out. So really kind of thinking about both the financial side of things, but also just your physical, energetic capacity to do the work. And I can only imagine in a yoga space where you are working with, there's a different energy level, I think. I can imagine too, depending on who you're working with from a yoga perspective than just, consulting with a client. So that not just your time capacity, but your energetic capacity to keep doing the work really matters. So you can put that stuff down in a spreadsheet and then kind of go, okay, this is where I need to be. Now I can start to make decisions about how much time I'm going to give or not give.
Right. Oh, this is so helpful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
If people want to reach out and work with you, how do they do that? What's the best way that they can contact you?
So my website is prodigyandco.com. So the word Prodigy, A-N-D spelled out, C-O, prodigyandco.com. You can find me on social media at Jessica M. Kinsey, both on Facebook and on Instagram and LinkedIn. And then my email is jessica@prodigyandco.com, but you can find that on the website. So the website's kind of the easiest place to sort of start and see what's going on, and reach out there if there's interest in, working together, doing something, or having a consultation.
That's great. Thank you so much. Also, what was your title again? You said it at the beginning, and I wanted to ask you how you got to that title.
Social Impact Strategist.
So good. Did that come easily?
No, it did not. That came after 2 or 2.5 years, probably. And admittedly, I've narrowed down my focus to nonprofits and social impact work over the past 18 months or so. So that title wouldn't even have been kind of in the realm of things in my first year or so of business. But I wanted something that was a little more, even though not everybody gets it, it makes people kind of go, what is that? I mean, they understand each of the individual words. So then but when I say I'm a consultant or I work with nonprofits, it's a little bit like eyes glazing over. Oh, cool. Like I know people who do that. Social impact strategists, while they might not fully understand it because they can, put all of the words together and kind of get it, it makes them ask the question like, oh, what exactly does that mean? And because I do different types of work, but from my perspective, it all comes down to helping people do more good and be sustainable and earn, revenue and earn income doing it. That really kind of encapsulates all of it in, 3 words, which is hard to do.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing.
Yeah, this has been great. I really enjoy having these kind of conversations, so I am happy to be here.
Thank you. Okay, connected yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. What was your key takeaway? One of my key takeaways here after the conversation with Jessica was just thinking about how much work really goes into both a nonprofit and a for-profit in terms of marketing and getting word out there about the business and also focusing on making an income. I know that yoga teachers really want to help everyone in their community. I feel this all the time in my own business. So recently I was looking at how I could put a group class together. And that's what I was talking to Jessica about with the whole yoga for people who have had concussions or traumatic brain injury. That's still really in the back of my mind. And then just this week, someone reached out and said that working one-on-one with me is out of their budget. So there are different ways where I am brainstorming of how can I serve my community, and also how can I serve those who can't afford my services or who can't attend a regular yoga class or session with me. I think this is something we can tackle together, Connected Yoga Teachers. If you have ideas, I would love to hear them, either in our Facebook group or in the show notes. So if you go to the connectedyogateacher.com/143, it would be great to hear your ideas. Do you have a nonprofit? If you do, make sure you share a link to it in the show notes page in the comments. And it'd be great just to see and hear from you of how you do that as a yoga teacher. Before I sign off, I want to tell you about the training again that I'm hosting in Bermuda. Warm, sunny, multiple shades of blue. That's what Bermuda means to me, as well as just such a super safe and friendly atmosphere. As a Canadian, I get told all of the time that our society is quite friendly. In Bermuda, turn that up about 10 notches, and that's what the friendliness is like there. I've already been to the studio where we're going. Samantha is a wonderful host. It's a beautiful space. You open the door to the studio and you're looking right at the ocean. It is really unbelievable. And all of this is a very short drive from the airport. I think it's about 10-minute drive from the airport, which for me is unbelievable. Here in Ontario, I have to drive about 3 hours to get to the airport. So if you would like to join me in Bermuda, hang out there, learn for 3 days, hang out some more, it's a 20-hour in-person yoga for pelvic health training, and it's at Just Breathe Studio. If you search for Just Breathe Studio in Bermuda, I can't wait till you see the pictures. For more information of how to register for that, go to theconnectedyogateacher.com and look under trainings and events. If you can't study with me in person, there is also an online option that is going to be opening very soon. So make sure you are on the wait list for the Pelvic Health Professionals membership site. Also, when you go to pelvichealthprofessionals.com, click on resources. Make sure that you've taken in all of our free resources there before the doors open near the end of 2019. I want to just take a moment and share some gratitude here, Connected Yoga Teachers. I am so grateful for hanging out with you when you decide that you can spend some time listening to the podcast, listening to our guests, sending an email, posting a comment, posting in our Facebook group. It really means so much. So thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. I also want to thank our team, Suzanne, Crunch, and Cindy, for making today's episode possible. And thank you, a huge shout out as well to Renee, who is helping us with our hiring process of bringing a new person onto the team. If all goes as planned, which sometimes things don't go as planned with a small business, but if all goes as planned, then Renee will have helped us to choose a new community manager to be part of our Connected Yoga Teacher team. So thank you so much, Connected Yoga Teachers. And before I sign off, I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, to your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?